Welcome to the Phosphine Catalogue, number 15032. We see light where others see only darkness. If the reader will forgive me, I'll begin with a small matter of housekeeping before describing the 24 lots in the catalogue this week. An article of lost property was found in the Colquhoun Gallery after last Friday's auction. A small spectacle case made of very fine dark green leather. Though no name or monogram is to be found on the outer, the soft calfskin inner bears the stamped motto, Videmus ubi reme in vitro erunt, which my colleague Warwick Blackwood translates as, we see where the cracks in the glass will be. Given the personalised nature of this item, I'm certain that it will have been missed. The catalogue will be pleased to reunite it with its rightful owner, who may reclaim it from reception or by calling and making postage arrangements. In either case, ownership can be proved simply by describing the, nature of the spectacles found within. Please ask for me, Jude Francis Sharp, when you call. I am maddeningly curious to hear the explanation. Lot number 9755. Erinnerrungen. Unknown artist, early 1941. A single-sided gramophone recording of a solo violin. We have set up the smallest of our rooms this week, the Colquhoun Gallery, with an unusual musical installation. The gallery may be booked for 2 people. Wait, Moena, let me try that again. The gallery must be booked for 2 people. We furnished the compact wood-panelled basement gallery with a pair of dark red leather armchairs around an extremely high-quality Sondek LP12 record player, graciously supplied by Lynn Products of Glasgow. This supply was chosen because, though Lynn Products and its owner, Ivor Tiefenbrunn, didn't invent the turntable, they do understand that there is more information on a record than most people are capable of accessing. On Mr. Tiefenbrunn's recommendation, we have positioned a pair of speakers made by Floating Harbour Audio of Bristol at the correct distance from the armchairs. We've set up the gallery's acoustic environment to best convey the music on the record, just as we rebuild them entirely for each new painting we hang. The devil is always in the details. The physical record is non-standard due to its age, with many unfamiliar features to the modern 1976 listener. Everything from the size, 9.5 inches, to the material, shellac, to the instructions on the yellowed paper label recommending playing at approximately 80 RPM rather than the ubiquitous 78, may be found surprising. Though daily calibration is a challenge, we believe we have set up the Sondek at the right speed, a hair over 80 RPM. The experience of listening to the music on this record, if not the quality of the recording, is wondrous. It is best experienced in person, of course. I can hardly do it justice here, but it appears to be a recording of an exquisite but maudlin violin solo. More than that, some magic is woven into either the record or perhaps by the music itself. Upon first listening, I found myself transported, mentally or perhaps more than that, to distant places that I have never set foot in. The forests of Styria, Munich at sundown, and a quaint rural village in Wallachia, though curiously given the date, all unmarred by the ravages of war. The unnamed performer, clearly a virtuoso, takes the listener on a journey through 9 different movements, rising to heights of fury in some and crashing down into pitiful dirges in others, each accompanied by this out-of-body experience. While we've not been able to formally identify the violinists, given the year of the recording, our resident musicologist Clara O'Neill ventures to guess at either Layla Waddle, Tom Canashir, or possibly Deanna Joplin. I, however, dear reader, have my own suspicions about the fiddler on the record. I believe it is the same man who put this lot up for auction. My housemate, Edward Porter. Moena, I finally met Edward Porter. You know, my reclusive housemate. He still hasn't left his room, but on passing his doorway late Monday night, I heard it click open. I stopped mid-step on the stairway and turned. The door had swung quietly inward, revealing a void behind. It was completely dark inside his room. The dim light of the landing seemed to stop at his door in a sharp line of black on the carpet. I held my breath, straining to hear more than the pounding of rain on the hallway windows. You remember that awful gale at the start of the week? I had half a mind to continue up to my room, leaving Edward to whatever spooky dark machinations he was up to, when the light changed inside. The shadow that had been pressed up against his doorway sort of shifted and withdrew, showing then the inside of his room, like the tide going out and revealing previously hidden rocks. I took a step closer and called, "Hello, Edward?" The yellow light of the city filtered through the dirty windows into his room. Standing at the threshold, I could see the room was large, but mostly empty, containing only a 4-poster bed with heavy, dark curtains drawn completely around, with a small table next to it. I could see no other furniture, but the walls were covered in paintings from floor to ceiling. There wasn't a single spare space. Ah, the player returns. "Jude, do come in, won't you?" a scratchy voice said, as a thin hand wrapped around the open door, followed by a pale face with sunken black eye sockets. Edward's nails were long, yellow, and sharpened to a point 2 inches past the end of bony fingers. "Given all I've said, Morwenna, I should have just left. That would have been the sensible thing to do, right? I would have, if it weren't for another quality I heard in his voice. He sounded kind, and a kind word goes a long way. So I stayed. I can't guess how old Edward is, but I'm not daft. He's obviously older than he should be. Older than a human should be. And, you know, that might have shocked me in the past, but to my surprise, it doesn't now. I've seen so much since working at the catalogue. Have you to thank for that, I suppose, Morwenna? Or you to blame, maybe. After Edward shut the door behind us, the sound of the rain stopped suddenly. I could still see the torrent beating against the windows, but it was now totally silent. Edward almost glided across the room to the table by the bed, where this record, labelled Erinnerrungen, sat in an old gramophone player. "You will sell this for me?" he said, as he cranked the ancient clockwork machine, then dropped the needle onto the disc. "I have no longer need for it." The recording of the violin came very quietly from the speaker. No electricity to amplify it. It sounded distant, echoey and indistinct. Edward nonetheless closed his bruised eyes and held up his hands, savouring it, like he had never heard anything more divine. As I stood, dumbfounded, he began to sway and dance gently around the room, humming along quite tunefully to the melody that he obviously knew well. I was bemused at his request and not a little charmed by the eccentricity of my housemate. But right then, I noticed the floor. It was not carpet. I squinted in the dim light as Edward continued padding around the room, swaying to the music. His footsteps were silent because what I had assumed was thick carpet was, in fact, soil. I stepped back and raised a foot to see my slippers covered in this dark, wet mud. The whole floor of this room, this 3rd floor room, was soil. That was quite enough for me, but I, even then, didn't wish to be rude. "Is that, you playing?" I asked him, on a hunch, hoping to add to the details I'd need to auction it. He stopped dancing suddenly, mid-twirl. With a rattling sigh, he lifted the needle off the record The music stopped, and the room returned to utter silence. "I can no longer remember," Edward Porter said, pressing the disc into my hands, and politely, but firmly, showing me out. When I visited our client for lot number 9755, Mr. Porter described Erinnerrungen to me as an infinity record. A clever trick employed by some record players, used for background music, art installations, or sometimes museums and shops. But in this example, it is the record itself that plays forever. When the needle reaches the end of the recording, a diagonal groove brings the playhead back to the start, and the violin begins anew. Plan extra time, reader, when you visit, as upon this second listening, you'll find many details changed. A movement that previously wraps one up in visions of a cosy alehouse in a forgotten village in central Bavaria might now march to the tune of an invading army, then again with the waltz of a royal court. Each repetition of this record overwrites a little of the original, shifting the music so subtly that one quite forgets which came first, the tune or the variation. Listening must be done in pairs for safety, dear reader, lest you, too, like our dear client, forget yourself.
Hi folks, Tris here, writer of the Phosphine Catalogue. I do hope you love our show. If so, you might be interested to know that there are more episodes available on our Patreon. Between seasons, when Jude is away, Warwick Blackwood is curator, played by yours truly, and he has a very different attitude to curation. Membership starts at just £3 a month, and for your support of our independent production, you'll get episodes a week or so ahead of the public feed, and at higher tiers, the bonus Blackwood episodes, concept art, free stuff from our store, and even your name in the credits. No matter how you support Wolfie and I, even if it's just spreading the word to your friends, thank you so much for making this show possible. Okay, let me turn over this cassette.
Lot number 43226. Civil Twilight. Elbwyn Redan, 1972. Oil on canvas. Agar wood frame. Situated on the east wall of the Wolf Room this week is a near-abstract oil painting by Elbwyn Redan, a name that the reader may be more familiar with by his association with his work as a Guy's art critic than as a painter, though his work has featured in the Solomon Gallery here in London more than once over his career. A graduate of the Academy of the Fine Arts in Istanbul, Mr. Redan has made a name for himself as a celebrated writer and speaker, most recently at the Brighton Fringe Below last year, and the keen reader may purchase tickets for his next appearance at the Edinburgh Midnight Hall on the 25th of January. The painting itself stands 6 foot high by 8 foot wide, and on first appraisal is a sunset over Istanbul. The waterside scene shows boats pulled up to the Ortaköy Pier Square, looking across that grand strait that separates Europe and Asia. The sun has almost set, but is yet illuminating the twin peaks of the mosque on the left side of the painting. Few people are depicted in the scene, as one might expect of a Muslim city at this time of day. Look at the man in the bottom right, the strokes of paint blurred and bent. Is he perhaps late for prayer? The sun sets, the moon rises, and the veil of night falls on the city of emperors, and some that do not sleep are abroad. Moena, I know we've not spoken about it yet, but I think you're really going to love the play. We had an impromptu rehearsal at Rossetti House last night, much to my surprise. After dinner out, Sarah and I returned home to an impromptu opening party, it seemed, and you'll never guess who I found holding court in the lounge. Lord Aldwych, of all people, was on the sofa, telling a story and surrounded by an enraptured audience of my housemates Joe, David, Rachel and Ola. I'd hardly got my coat off before the man had jumped up to shake my hand and introduce himself to Sarah. "Lord Aldwych," I said, "to what do we owe the pleasure?" Jude, 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 he replied. Come now. Anyone who knows me intimately simply must call me Dean. And that was that. Despite being raised to be polite to my elders and betters, by the end of dinner the whole lot of us were on first name terms. You know how he is, Morwenna. There's simply no arguing with the man. He doesn't take no for an answer. Ever. Well, naturally, over dinner the subject of our play, Sween or Dryg, came up, and Aldwych roped the whole party into the cast. Sarah too. He reworked large parts of the play there and then, somehow keeping it all in his head, and gave out torn sheets of the spare scripts they just happened to have with him. After dinner, we pushed our long, heavy wooden dining table over to the windows and cleared a space for the rehearsal. It was really fun, actually. Jo and David took to their roles of the princess and the page very well, after we'd paused for Jo to dash upstairs to find the perfect dress. Aldwych cast Sarah as the blacksmith's son, much to my quiet delight. I find that I enjoy the process of memorising the lines and then embodying commutatio in his mad plans. It seems there's a lot of room for interpretation when reading a script. Aldwych hasn't asked for much direction outside of dialogue, save the occasional enters, exits, or picks up sword. He is, however, extremely exacting in what we say. A few times over the course of the evening, the production came to a halt when one of us misread our lines. "No!" Aldwych would invariably bellow. Shocking Jo and Ola, I would make us start all over again from the beginning of the scene. He's right fussy about his precious script. I thought that some of the suggestions Ola had were better, but nothing could sway the old dragon. It was after midnight before we finished, though I think we could have played until dawn. It's a riot of a story, and no one seemed tired. But our director had other business to attend to, it seemed, so Rachel showed Dean out. After the front door closed, it was like a spell had been lifted. We slowly realised that the real world of work and commuting and telephones would require us in the morning. So we all drifted, reluctantly, to bed in uneasy silence. We're rehearsing again in the bell room after work tonight, Morwenna. Give yourself a break and come and watch. It'd be nice to see you for a change. After all, what have you got to lose? Civil Twilight is best viewed early in the morning, or just before we close at 7 in the evening. Step back, reader, when you visit, and soften your gaze a little. The sharp contrast of the white stone and dark river blends with the dark sky and rising moon in the east. Do you see the hint of bindweed coiling up the street lamps, lifting drain covers, choking the tree-lined boulevard? Twilight marks the ancient threshold of our control of the world during the day, back to the domain of those that walked the land long before us. This painting reminds me that the uneasy twilight peace between our worlds has nothing civil about it.
The Phosphine Catalogue is a Namtao production. The voice of Jude Francis Sharp is Wolfie Thorns, and the show is written and produced by me, Tris Oaten. For links to our merch store, the music, and Mastodon account, check out the podcast's website, phosphinecatalogue.com. To become a patron of the arts and get bonus episodes and other perks, it would be very kind of you to support us at patreon.com/phosphinecatalogue. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time.